Hello, everyone. It's been a few months, but we are finally back into the stands, back in for a second year. As always, I'm Colin, joined here by Chris and Robbie. And I think it's pretty right to kind of start off with the NFL, considering that has been the main topic of discussion. Week one of the NFL, always a lot of points. So obviously, I say the New York Jets are probably the bigger story right now in town, considering how that game played out, the injuries. But we're going to start off with my New York Giants. At the end of last year on this show, I was very high on the Giants going into the 2023 season. I felt that, coming off that year where they defied all expectations, going to the divisional round of the playoffs, even improving in the draft, getting Darren Waller in free agency, I had a lot of high hopes for this year. And that kind of carried into that first Sunday Night Football game against the Cowboys. But that game was an utter disaster. I mean, really anything that could have went wrong for us went wrong in that performance. A 40-0 shutout in MetLife Stadium in the soaking rain. Now, I say the first drive looked pretty good. Daniel Jones really didn't throw the ball, but we pushed all the way down the field, running the ball, getting down to the Cowboys' red zone. But ultimately, Andrew Thomas got called for a false start. For reference, Andrew Thomas had not have gotten called for a false start previously all season or previous season, and he got called for a false start. Giants got it in field goal range, kicked the field goal, got blocked. Cowboys returned it back, and before you knew it, it was 9-0, 16-0. 23-0, 30-0, 40-0. It was an utter disaster. So where do you go from here? Well, the good thing to say is that you really can only go up. I think that coming off that loss, you're playing the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday, a game you have to win, by the way, because the Cardinals should be the worst team in football. They should be the number one leader in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. That's a game you have to win. I mean, overall, though, there's really not much I can say. The defense got outperformed by the Cowboys. Prescott didn't have a great game throwing the ball, but still the running game for the Cowboys. The offensive line, that was one of the worst offensive line performances I've seen from the Giants in a long time. And that's saying something because, listen, for the past over 10 years that I've been watching this team, it feels like every season people are complaining about how poor the offensive line is. And at this point, it's becoming a still narrative. I'm just honestly sick of talking about it. Andrew Thomas had a great season last year, but Evan Neal, Mark Lewinsky, they were atrocious. There's no way around it. And, when you have Micah Parsons, one of the best defenders in the NFL, coming after you, you're going to have a very hard time stopping them. So, he got utterly dominated. John Michael Schmitz, it was his first game starting that catcher as a rookie. He had a ball that went past Daniel Jones. A lot has been made about why Daniel Jones stayed into the end of that game. And, Brian Dable answered that he kind of wanted to take something into next week, but ultimately that ended up looking very poor, seeing what happened on Monday night, also in MetLife Stadium with Aaron Rodgers. We'll obviously get into that later. But, yeah, just all around, just not a lot of positives. Nothing I can really say. Darren Waller, he did get a couple reps. He got free catches, 36 yards. Times he did get from the ball, he looked pretty solid. But we're told he has a nagging hamstring issue, although we're told he's going to play through it. So, Chris, what do you think about what you saw on Sunday?
Yeah, well, you covered most of it, but, you also mentioned how, the Giants' direction from here on can only be up. And my question to that is, after this Sunday, how much far up can this team go after when you look at the schedule and they play the 49ers in San Francisco? They come home then and play the Seahawks on Monday Night Football, who are a fairly solid football team. Then they play the Dolphins, and they play the Bills, and the Commanders are a toss-up. And it's just a ridiculous schedule. And really, going into this year with the upgrades they made, and then giving Daniel Jones that contract extension, you expected much better results. And definitely the one thing I'd say on top of every Giants fans list heading into this season was that the New York Giants need to play better in these big divisional matchups, because they only won one. They were victorious in only one divisional matchup last year, and that was that game in Washington. They obviously had the tie to Washington at home, and then lost every other game against Dallas and Philadelphia. And heading into this season, right, the Giants had a opportunity, right? This was a big test to really see how the season was going to go. But not only that, right, how much this team really improved in the offseason. Can they close in on, this gap between them and the Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles? And they absolutely proved. And I was listening to the K Show and all these shows on 98.7, and they pretty much summed it up. There's one way to sum it up. The Giants did not belong on the same field as the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. It was an utter, just awful performance, just a catastrophe. And I look ahead to this Sunday. If the New York Giants do not win this football game, the season is over. I mean, it is really. I don't know how you can be optimistic after that. The season definitely comes into question after that. I mean, the playoffs. The division I think is over already.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you ask me, the division is already over. After 1 week, it's crazy. But that's what we love about football is how just how tight each game is, or how important each game is. I should say, because this definitely was not. This was everything. All we wanted was to see a game. I think even if the Giants lost this football game, but we saw a good competitive matchup, we would at least head into Arizona with high hopes, and then maybe San Francisco with high hopes after that. But if they're going to, it just awful. Literally the worst thing that could have possibly happened to the New York Giants.
And Chris, finishing off here, I mean, we love the job that Brian Dable did last year, but still the one big knock on Brian Dable is he has not been able to beat the division. Like you said, you had that one win against Washington on Sunday Night Football. You had the tie against them, but you got swept by the Eagles and you got swept by the Cowboys. It's looking like we still don't belong on the same field as the Eagles and the Cowboys. And listen, I get it. The NFC East is a very tough division, but still, like if you ever want to be a contender, you have to try to compete in your division. You have to try to win your division. It's very hard to win Super Bowls when you're in the wild card, third place in your division. That's just not very often how it's done. But just from some perspective on the NFL and how fickle it can be, the Giants, a lot of people are very low on them. I saw a lot of predictions. Not many people think they're going to make the playoffs, truthfully. And that's kind of crazy to think about because I'm going to take you back to the Final Four in the NFC just a year ago. You had the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously. They were a very dominant football team. We're just 3 points away from winning the Super Bowl last year. Jalen Hurts had near an MVP season. I mean, they won last week. They still look pretty good. All I'd say, people kind of expect them to still be a favorite in the NFL. You have the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, that's a game we could talk about later, but they absolutely dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers team that was pretty close to the playoffs last year. Brock Purdy looked phenomenal, being a 7th round quarterback still, making that statement. Niners roster, top to bottom, phenomenal. Dallas Cowboys, obviously the team that beat us 40-0. All those 3 teams that I just mentioned are teams that are in a different league than the New York Giants, who were the 4th team to come in that Final Four of the NFC last year. So it really just kind of comes down to being able to repeat some of that miracle success we had last year, being able to play up to a tough schedule. Because if you remember, the Giants schedule wasn't too bad last year. We played the AFC South, a lot of games there, even some of the other, I think we also played against, just not as bad, tough of a schedule. Now the NFC East, the whole schedule for that division, very tough going forward. But it seems like now we got to kind of have to talk about the other team in New York, the New York Jets, don't we? That was kind of a game we saw on Monday night, right, Robbie?
Well, before I get into the Jets, and I want to talk about the Giants a little bit. First of all, thank you. It feels great to be back. But the Giants first. What I watched on that field, and myself, Colin, one of the other guys who does the show, Cam only watched the game on Thursday. I'm going to talk about that game on Thursday in a little while. What I watched on that field, and Chris said it well. You both said it well. The Giants look completely outmatched. But what I want to look at is people are talking about Dak Prescott possibly making a run for an MVP even this season. And he only threw for 143 passing yards, guys. He didn't prove enough to me that he's going to be excelling to that next level, rising up to the occasion. I mean, know who did? Tony Pollard. He had 2 touchdowns. The Cowboys defense rose to the occasion. But you really didn't see Dak Prescott take that next step that I think everyone was hoping to see. Because, I mean, Dak Prescott was a top betting favorite according to some of the betting odds this year, which is crazy for me. But, I can go on and on about this game, but the Giants shouldn't be that discouraged. He says the only way to go is up. But there have been teams recently that have gone off to 0-2 starts and have been really good. Most notably recently, Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals are 0-2 and then beat the Jets last year. Look how far they got. I mean, listen, the Giants start this season is really tough. It's possible that they can be 0-6, but I don't think they're going to be 0-6. I mean, we could talk about the Cardinals game later on, but I think the Giants should not be this discouraged. They have a young offensive line. I think they're going to be able to gel as this season goes on. So I think the Giants are a playoff caliber team. I think that should not even be a discussion for how weak how some parts of the NFC are. I mean, granted, there were some crazy results that may have changed a lot of people's mindsets on the look of what the Giants could possibly be dealing with going for most likely a wild card spot. But that's enough on the Giants. I think you guys said it perfectly. Let's head to my boys in green and white. And I think the only way to characterize this is by saying this term first, and that is You wish Aaron Rodgers played for 4 quarters, and he played for 4 plays. Yes, Aaron Rodgers went down almost basically immediately, and then Jets. What I saw on TV when me and Colin watched the game together on Monday night was that Jets fans' hopes slid down, like you're going down a going down a slide, and I don't think that really should be the case. You can make an argument that the Jets defense is a top 5 defense in the league. You can make an argument that Zach Wilson will have some of the best weapons in the league. He had an Offensive Rookie of the Year winner. He's a former top wide receiver 1. He's one of the fastest receivers in the league in McCole Hardman, who's a streak specialist. He's other weapons at tight end. Tyler Conklin had a great season last year. So Zach Wilson has the weapons. It's just the Jets are just going to need to give him the confidence to do things. And managing the load is my comparison for this was when the Niners had Jimmy Garoppolo, and when they were like really good. Jimmy Garoppolo was not ridiculously good. It was just the talent around Jimmy Garoppolo took him to that next level and got what got him the money. I think it's going to be the same with Zach Wilson. People are saying that Zach Wilson can only win 5-6 games. Looking down the Jets' schedule, I think the Jets could be, and I think they will be over 500 with Zach Wilson at quarterback. I don't think that should be discussed. There are some games that you can now, while we're in debate with Aaron Rodgers, if it could be a win or a loss, that I think could be automatic losses. And I'll give you 2 of them right here. Kansas City, Philadelphia. I do not consider those winnable games. Not really as much of winnable games anymore. Buffalo away. Miami away, you can even consider that, or how good the Dolphins looked. And I think we'll discuss that as well in a little bit. What I saw on that field was a lot of heart, a lot of fight, and a much better disciplined defense, because the Jets defense in preseason got penalized a lot. But Hall of Fame game, they had 8 penalties. I think the Jets as a whole had 9 penalties in the first half. And now you look to where they're at now. Zach Wilson only threw for about 140 yards, yeah. But you see how many times they ran the ball? Listen, if the Falcons can go out and win a game with Desmond Ridder at quarterback, I think the Jets will be in a better position with Zach Wilson this year. Aaron Rodgers is still going to be a mentor for him. I think Zach Wilson will be much better than I couldn't even find a word there, but Zach Wilson will be much better. And I think I'll leave it to these guys. Colin, I'll start with you. What's your biggest takeaway from that game with the Jets?
Well, just to start off, I mean, really, at least when the game first started, that atmosphere in MetLife Stadium was unlike anything I've ever seen for a Jets game. And I think good for the Jets fans, they finally had their moment, Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, maybe cementing himself as one of the best quarterbacks in Jets history if he could have a good season here. He ran out with the American flag on the anniversary of 9/11. Really a really cool and really touching moment for those Jets fans. But as you said, 4 plays in, he goes down with an Achilles injury, out for the year. So obviously you hate to see it, because at least when I first started watching football, Aaron Rodgers kind of feels like one of those last quarterbacks that's left from that generation. I kind of feel like that he, was a part of my childhood, truly. Him, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, all those guys, watching them from years. So seeing him go down like this, I'm rooting for his comeback. I hope he comes back for the Jets next year and, is able to have a good season. Wishing the best for him there. But yeah, I mean, ultimately that's it for Aaron Rodgers. So we turn to Zach Wilson. It just so happens that Robbie happens to be probably one of the biggest Zach Wilson fans on the planet. I mean, truly, Robbie very much believes in Zach Wilson. And I mean, it's good for him. It's good to have hope for your team, but I'm just not very much sold on him. Granted, I think that he could be better, that he's in his third season so far, but at least from what I've seen, the sample size, I'm not sold yet. Now, granted, the Jets won that football game, and, credit to them for doing that. It really speaks to how Saleh got that team to play. It speaks to the veterans they brought in, guys like Alan Lazard, guys like even Randall Cobb, bringing that leadership to that team that really wasn't there before. But the Jets did not win that game because of Zach Wilson. They won that game because of their defense. They won that game because, Josh Allen had a horrendous game with 4 turnovers. They won that game because Xavier Gibson ended up returning a punt return touchdown. And one of the most electric plays I've seen in a while in a primetime game. I mean, that was phenomenal, especially see them turn the lights out of MetLife Stadium, see that Jets crowd react. But back to Zach Wilson, obviously they drafted him 2nd overall. He was meant to be the future of this franchise, but his rookie year, 55% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 11 picks. That's obviously no. Let me speak first. That's not what you want. 2nd year, 54% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 7 picks. Once again, this Jets roster is very good. That's the reason why many had them as a Super Bowl contender with Aaron Rodgers. But the way I see it is unless Zach Wilson is able to really have a massive leap, like we're talking like near a Josh Allen level leap where he goes from pretty bad to a superstar, this Jets team to me is not very different from the Jets team from last year. And you remember that Jets team from last year. Once again, it was a very good team, all around good roster. But ultimately in the NFL, you need a good quarterback to win. That's the most important position in sports, and it always will be. So Zach Wilson, this Jets season comes down to him. If he's still the same Zach Wilson that we know, this is going to be another 7-10 team. So it really comes down to that. Like I said, I'm not sold on what I see. And I mean, Chris, what do you make about the Jets situation?
Listen, I mean, obviously it's just such a brutal injury. I mean, everyone understands that this has been the biggest news in sports, this injury, because I mean, the New York Jets finally got their guy. They finally got the guy who, right, it seems like if he wasn't going to come to the Jets, he was probably going to retire, right? That was the conversation that was had. And he comes here with a chance to really do something special with a special roster, a very talented roster, a really good defense. And and obviously some very good receivers as well. But and obviously things start off amazing with that pregame ceremony, and then obviously gets hurt. But it's such a tough situation because you do unfortunately have to brush it off. But and I think that speaks a lot about this roster, how they were able to pick Rodgers up, and they're going to continue to need to do that for the rest of the season. But and I know you like Robert Saleh said on the K show as well. He was interviewed by Peter Rosenberg and Donald Greca, and he said that Zach Wilson is the guy. He is going to be the guy. The question I have, I understand you want to believe in him. I understand he's you want to believe him to be the guy. He was the second overall pick, or right, a few years ago, and he can be better, right? He had this mentorship from Aaron Rodgers. He has a better team this year than last year, but how much can you believe in this guy and let him? God forbid this gets bad, right? God forbid he loses the next 2 games, right? Obviously, playing in Dallas in a hostile environment, it's going to be tough. How long can you let this guy hurt this roster?
And, it reminds me a lot of, remember at the end of last season when they played the Jaguars, it was a Thursday night football game in the pouring rain. Zach Wilson had a poor game. He just was not good. And he got benched for Chris Streveler. It's tough to really say that this guy is going to be your franchise quarterback, or this guy is going to lead a Super Bowl contending roster for a guy who got benched for Chris Streveler. I mean, listen, I'm sure all New York fans, all Jets fans like Robbie, obviously rooting for this guy to succeed. You want him to. You drafted him second overall with that intention of being your franchise quarterback. But just what I've seen so far, I just don't know how long you can really go off that. I mean, there was conversations last year if he would even be back on the Jets. Robert Saleh, put confidence behind him last year, but ultimately he took that away. So it's really tough for me to kind of see that they believe in him. Even a Monday Night Football, like a lot of I remember even Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were saying, a lot of the passes they were throwing were near the line of scrimmage. They weren't really letting them test out his arm. And, coming out of college, that was really his main trait, right? It was his explosive arm in BYU. We saw him make a lot of highlight throws, have a big cannon, but he just really has not done that for the Jets. But obviously it sucks. You wanted Aaron Rodgers to be that guy. I mean, it was really one of the most exciting stories in sports, seeing Aaron Rodgers maybe lift this team back to their first Super Bowl in over 50 to 60 years. But yeah, I mean, going forward, you have to go with Zach Wilson. We'll see how he does going forward. But yeah.
One final note on Zach, and this is going to be my end before we go into one of my favorite games of the weekend, because we're going to talk about a couple of the games from the weekend. Zach Wilson wasn't picked with the second overall pick without cause. And I remember when Zach Wilson got picked, because if you remember that draft back in 2021, everyone was hyping Justin Fields to be the second overall pick. Now, I didn't like Justin Fields very much, and I like Zach Wilson more because I like Zach Wilson's accuracy better. Now, you can argue that Zach Wilson, my comparison for him, when I did something back in the draft, my comparison for him was a shorter Josh Allen, because my reason for that was big arm accuracy problems. Josh Allen, when he came out of Wyoming, same problem. My other issue is, who is Zach Wilson has an offensive coordinator for the 2 years before? An inexperienced LaFleur. You get someone more experienced than Nathaniel Hackett, who I'm going to have trust in as well. who has called Aaron Rodgers offenses before. He's done it for years. He may not be a head coach, which may be a problem or part of the problem for Denver from last year. But I think as an offensive coordinator and more experienced offensive coordinator, I think you'll have a bigger impact for Zach Wilson along with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
It's just like, obviously, Hackett, we saw him have those years with Aaron Rodgers being an MVP candidate, but, ultimately didn't work out in Denver. Now, I'm not sure about Nathaniel Hackett because obviously, yeah, he had a lot of success as a coordinator, but as a head coach in Denver, it didn't work out. But you have to wonder, was those Aaron Rodgers MVP years, was that a credit to Hackett or is that a credit to Aaron Rodgers? That's still yet to be seen because you compare it to Josh Allen, I see a lot of that, coming from a small school, having a lot of arm talent. But what really made Josh Allen develop from that quarterback into becoming a superstar? It was because of Brian Dable. Exactly. I'm not sure if Nathaniel Hackett is that guy yet because, it's very easy to – I mean, we saw Josh McDaniels, right? He was the Patriots OC for all those years of Tom Brady, but the guy becomes a head coach. He can't do it at all. And even with the Raiders here, he's still struggling. So there's a big difference between trying to coach up a superstar Hall of Fame quarterback versus trying to coach up a young rookie project. And I'm not sure if Nathaniel Hackett can do that. If he can, it'll be really the difference for Zach Wilson in this Jets team this year. But I don't know if I'm sold on it. We saw in Denver how that offense was atrocious. I mean, Russell Wilson, that whole offense collapsed. I mean, they struggled to score even 17 points on a weekly basis.
Was that more on Hackett or the somewhat decline of Russell Wilson? Because you saw what happened when Russell Wilson against Vegas this weekend.
That is true. It's still yet to be seen, but
Hackett or Russell Wilson?
That's the problem, though. You really don't know in Nathaniel Hackett yet. I'm not sure what to make of him with this offense. Obviously Aaron Rodgers vouched for this guy. I'm not sure if that's because he loved the offense or because he's close to him. But I guess you have to wait to see. But yeah, it really comes down to if Nathaniel Hackett can have a Brian Dable impact for Josh Allen on Zach Wilson.
So let's head to some games because there's so many games I want to talk about. But I think the one that's going to have the biggest impact, other than Jordan Love, was Tua Tagovailoa. And we're going to head out to Miami and the Chargers. Now, I remember when these two, by the way, were back-to-back draft picks in a first round that featured Joe Burrow. And I think Tua Tagovailoa made a bigger statement than I thought he would. 466 yards against the Chargers defense. Over 500 total yards of offense. Now, what's crazy to me, other than Tyreek Hill getting 215 receiving yards, was how good Tua looked in the pocket. The Chargers' pass rush was not very good. Now, granted, Tua threw a pick, but I think the Dolphins' offense is going to be way better than I thought it would be, which is concerning. I mean, you saw what other teams' offense is not looking as good. The Dolphins are proving everyone wrong because I think some people thought the Dolphins may not even be a playoff contender this year. They're showing themselves that, yeah, we're going to go out there against an okay Chargers defense. You go out and we put up 36 on the Chargers. It's pretty impressive. Now, you had big days from River Craft caught a touchdown and Tyreek Hill just went crazy in the second half. My question from this game would be, because it's a lot of statements about the Dolphins and the Chargers as well. I mean, Justin Herbert only had 229 passing yards against the Dolphins defense without Jalen Ramsey. If Justin Herbert went up against a defense, let's say the Jets, for example, where Josh Allen got locked down by that defense, maybe it's because of him making bad reads, or you can make another bunch of excuses. What would Justin Herbert look like against a better defense than the Dolphins? Because I'm not sold on the Dolphins defense whatsoever. Because that defense, almost fully healthy, allowed 40 points to Zach Wilson. You could argue it was in the fourth quarter. It doesn't matter. He allowed 40 points to Zach. They allowed 40 points to Zach Wilson. So the Dolphins defense, I'm not totally sold on yet. But like I said, big statement from Tua. Colin, what are your thoughts on Dolphins Chargers so far?
Well, I mean, we're already hearing about how Tua might be the week one MVP. And it comes a long way, really, because, a lot of concerns about him, at least when they first got drafted, were that the arm wasn't there. But I mean, truly, when you have that duo of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, that's almost impossible for all defenses to stop. I mean, never do you really see two guys that speedy, that dynamic play together in a wide receiver core. But I kind of want to talk about the Chargers here from the perspective of we've heard a lot about how Brandon Staley is on the hot seat, and it's deservedly so. I mean, once again, The reason why the Chargers got this guy is because, he served as defensive coordinator for the Rams. They figure that you get him there, solidify our defense with Justin Herbert. But, we're kind of seeing a shift now in the NFL where a lot of teams are moving away from defensive head coaches. You still see Sean McDermott in Buffalo, obviously Bill Belichick with the Patriots, Robert Saleh, being the head coach for the Jets. But it seems like it's kind of more of a trend now to pick up offensive guys, get, former offensive coordinators to be head coaches. And Brandon Staley has a lot to prove because we all remember that wild card game against the Jaguars where they lost 27-0, or they were down 27, or they're up 27-0, and then the Jaguars came back and won the football game. So I think Brandon Staley is not long to not really going to stay for that long. I think that if the defense is really not going to improve, you need to get an offensive coach to go along with Justin Herbert. That's how I see the game so far.
Yeah, Staley's been a problem for a while. Ever since he's got here, right? Obviously, as you said, brought here as a defensive coach. It is tough, right? This Dolphins team is lethal, but that's a tight game and a tough one for the Chargers. But yeah, Tua is phenomenal. Tua is just unbelievable this game, and yeah, as you said, it is really hard to not be successful with the weapons he has, but. At least the team is not, losing because of their quarterback. He's doing a phenomenal job with the pieces he's been handed.
I think the other obvious game we kind of need to get into is the one that started off the season between the Chiefs and the Lions. Because listen, the Detroit Lions had a lot of hype going into the season. They ended off on a very strong note. They were my personal. I feel that they're going to win the NFC North. I think this is a very good team, at least from what I've seen so far. And against Kansas City, sure, you didn't have Chris Jones. There was no Travis Kelce, but the Detroit Lions, a franchise that has been perennial losers, perennially not showing up to the big moment, they, on a national stage, took advantage and beat the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 21-20. Now, look, obviously the story of this game is that the Kansas City Chiefs receivers were dropping a lot. Former New York Giants legend Kadarius Toney had one of the worst games you'll ever see a wide receiver have, along with a bunch of other receivers. It really seemed like at some point that Mahomes was he had no one to throw to. And that's a problem because you lost Juju Smith-Schuster in free agency. You lost Tyreek Hill the year before. I'm sure that if any quarterback's going to be able to overcome that, it's Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce should be coming back either this week or coming back soon. So that you don't have to really worry about too much about that offense. But listen, it's hard to repeat as NFL champions. We saw when the Chiefs first won the Super Bowl, they were not able to accomplish that task. They lost to the Bengals. I don't think they're going to repeat this year. I think it's just too hard to, although Mahomes is undoubtedly now, especially with Tom Brady retired, undoubtedly the best player in football, has the most experience, the most rings. But the Lions, Jared Goff, sure, he didn't have a fantastic game, 22 for 35, 235 yards and a touchdown. But the Detroit Lions offense, I'm a big Ben Johnson fan. He didn't have a great play calling game necessarily against Kansas City, but this is a guy who I felt should have been considered for a lot of head coaching jobs last year. And, Dan Campbell, a lot of people at first kind of saw his act as just being kind of goofy. He was just a guy who was just a loudmouth. But truly, the players in Detroit want to play for this guy. And that says a lot about this culture because, once again, I've watched many Detroit Lions teams over the years that have just been uninspired, have been just flat out bad. But, we'll see how the competition is looking with, the Vikings, although they had that loss to the Buccaneers. The Packers with Jordan Love possibly emerging. But I think Detroit's going to be a big player in the NFC this year. I like what I saw out of them.
Yeah, it's insane that Patrick Mahomes, obviously, as you said, obviously the best player in football, how he still was able to have maybe the stat line isn't unbelievable, but of course that is because of his lack of receivers. And the guy could do it all. He led the team in rushing yards. And of course, he made great passes to receivers who just could not get the job done. And the Lions pull away with a tight game here. And now they played the Seahawks at home and then the Falcons. Two games that I think go in the Lions' favor. Albeit Seahawks might be a little, definitely not an easy win, but, I think that the Lions can definitely do it. I think there's definitely a chance this team could start out 3-0.
The Lions raised a couple of questions for me that I think will be answered in the next couple of weeks. First off, ground game. David Montgomery got 21 carries to 74 yards, and their first round pick, Jahmyr Gibbs, had 7 for 42. What are they going to do with him is my first question. Because you drafted this guy with a first round pick when there are, I think, other needs on this team. We all three of us had our reactions to that pick. My question is, what are they going to do with him? Because I think that this could be similar to what happened with Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, where they drafted him, had him behind a couple of guys for like his first year or so, and then he emerges in his second season. Or, I mean, granted, Travis Etienne got injured his first year and was out for the first season. But I think this could be a very similar situation. And secondly, you can't go this game without pointing out guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds. Amon-Ra St. Brown could be, I think, a top 10 receiver in the league now. Granted, he only had 6 catches for 71 yards, but Amon-Ra St. Brown was open a lot, and he was able to create good separation against a decent Chiefs secondary. And I liked Sam Laporta. He got open. He had 5 catches for only 39 yards, but the Lions receivers outclassed what the Chiefs were doing in the passing game, I think. I mean, if you look at the Chiefs' leading receiver, it was former Packer, in terms of yards, former Packer Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Like, you cannot tell me that the Chiefs are a division-winning AFC champion contender, AFC championship game contender, with their leading receiver in week 1, not named Travis Kelce, being Marquez Valdes-Scantling. You can't do it for me. But our last thing with the NFL, and I want you guys to take a good look at this one. Out of all the teams in the league that we haven't mentioned yet, which team made the biggest statement week 1? I'll start because I'll let you guys take a quick look. My biggest team that made a monster statement, I couldn't go this without heading out west, and the Los Angeles Rams are proving me wrong. Listen, when I've been on other shows saying I think the Los Angeles Rams will win 7 games at max, and they were going to lose week 1. I think a lot of people believed that the Rams were going to lose to Seattle. But Matt Stafford returning 24 of 38 for 334. Geno Smith getting locked down in the passing game. I think that was the biggest statement for this one. He only had 112 yards. For context, that was less than Zach Wilson and barely more than Daniel Jones. I think that's a big statement as well. But I think the Rams defense looked great. Puka Nacua, I think that's how you say it? Puka Nacua? Something like that? Close enough. He had 10 for 119. Tutu Atwell, who I've been a big fan of for years, he had 6 for 119. It's the guys you don't know as much of who really made a statement in this game for me. And defensively, he had Ernest Jones. He had 4 tackles. There's a lot of other players, probably not a lot of people know about, who were able to make big, important plays. And Seattle, I mean, Kenneth Walker looked great in the running game. He had 12 for 64, which was more than Saquon Barkley for reference. And then Geno Smith getting locked down in the passing game. I think that's just it's a big problem for Seattle when you go out and you re-add Bobby Wagner. You have some decent weapons on defense, and you go out and allow 30 points to the Rams. Now, granted, the Rams aren't a bad team, but yikes. I think Seattle was going to be a possible. I think I'm on high as Seattle entering the season as Colin was in Detroit. So, listen, I think the team that made the biggest statement, a positive statement, was Los Angeles for sure for me. Chris, who do you got?
I'm gonna go with one. They didn't win their game, and I'm gonna take it to the opposite coast. I'm gonna go with the New England Patriots because that was the game I watched. I was watching CBS the whole day, and then obviously went to NFL Sunday Night Football and watched the Giants. But I have to say, overall, I liked what I saw from the New England Patriots. Obviously, was rooting for them to try to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles, and they came fairly close. This was a close game. They immediately went down 16-0 in the first quarter, but made a comeback, right? Made it 16-14. Mac Jones had a solid game, right? 3 touchdowns, 316 yards. Look, I mean, an overall a decent performance, a very good performance. It's I think, the Patriots can win football games with this guy as the quarterback, and then the defense, right? To not let this game get away from them. You can argue that the Eagles maybe didn't play their best game, but still at home to open up the season this way. I think they made a statement because I'm not saying they're going to win this division. I don't even know if they'll make the playoffs. Right? This division is going to be tough, but and I hate to say this, but unfortunately, right, it does it make them I think the Jets are a better team than them, but right, I think Aaron Rodgers' injury, it does kind of go in the Patriots' favor, especially when you see the last game of the season is in New England between the Jets and the Jets and the Patriots. I mean, this team I think can make some noise.
Were you impressed statistically with Mac Jones? Were you impressed?
I mean, I think it's better than what people thought they were going to see. I mean, especially overall, I think just and of course we all know they have the coach, who seemed like he, questions were being raised. Is this guy on the way? Is he close to being on the way out? Right, even though he's 12 wins away from.
I don't even know what it is.
Oh, I forgot the number.
It's a number under like 15, I think.
Right.
Under 15.
Right, but if they can, this is definitely, I think, maybe they didn't make the biggest statement, as big of a statement as teams like the Dolphins, or as you mentioned, the Rams, or even like the 49ers, or even the Cowboys, but right, their defense. But I think the New England Patriots made a solid statement.
The obvious answer is the Dallas Cowboys. I can't bring myself to talk about that again, though, so we're going to go for something else. My honorable mention is the Cleveland Browns, who are having a very good showing against the Bengals, but my pick is the Green Bay Packers. And the reason why I am picking the Green Bay Packers is really just because of the talk around them going into this offseason. The biggest story was Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. A lot of people wrote off the Packers. Listen, they got, at least from what I've seen, the least media attention in that division, because you have the Detroit Lions, who are many people's, dark horse team to possibly go far, even mine as well. The Minnesota Vikings, sure, they had that loss to the Giants in the playoffs, but a very good season for them, and a lot of one-score victories. And then the Chicago Bears, who they ended up beating 38-20 on Sunday. Listen, people were talking a lot about the Bears and about Justin Fields because they think that the Bears could be a team to look out for. And, listen, Justin Fields has a lot of great rushing abilities. I like what I see him in the running game, but he still has to prove himself as a passer. And I think what the Green Bay Packers did here is they really still solidified themselves as a big threat in this division, because for years, when Rodgers was in his prime, even when Brett Favre was still, playing for the Packers as well, the Packers were the big brother in this division, right? It was kind of reminding me a lot of Brady in the AFC East. They used to always dominate this division. The Packers used to always bully the Vikings, the Lions, the Bears whenever they played them. And look, I don't think Jordan Love is going to be a Hall of Fame talent like Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, but he looked pretty damn good. I mean, we're looking at 245 yards, 3 touchdown passes. The Green Bay Packers are going to be a team that you're still going to have to look out for. And, it's still pretty crazy to say, because how often, this is really the only time in history we've seen that a team goes from a Hall of Fame quarterback to another Hall of Fame quarterback. So I'll have to wait to see on Jordan Love, but listen, I like how that Jordan Love era started off for the Green Bay Packers.
One final note, because I just got texted this question. Out of the Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, were you impressed by any of them? And I'm just going to answer this real quick. Bryce Young didn't go crazy for me. CJ Stroud was thrown in a bad spot, but Anthony Richardson looked really good. Listen, I thought when I was scrolling through some of the scores during Sunday afternoon, I really thought Jacksonville was going to lose to Indianapolis. And my reason for this is because Anthony Richardson, with the quote unquote weapons he has other than Michael Pittman, he looked pretty good. He went 24 of 37 for 223. A touchdown and an interception on a bad throw, but he also ran 10 times for 40 yards. Why this impresses me is that Indianapolis is doing something that not many other teams do with a rookie quarterback, and to let him do what he does best. Now, granted, some people say an arm strength is their quarterback's biggest talent. And the difference now with the Bears is that they're letting Justin Fields use his legs. And I think that's the biggest takeaway with Anthony Richardson. He's a young guy, very tall, looks great in the pocket, great arm strength, accuracy, pretty decent, but man, can he run. I was able to watch some of his film from Florida. My God, can he run. So I think if they let him be as mobile as possible, I think that's what will get Indianapolis to that next level. Now, granted, like I mentioned, I like CJ Stroud. He was thrown into a bad situation. Baltimore, they're a mess. But quickly, before we go to baseball, any of you guys have comments on this? Chris?
Yeah, Richardson really did have a good game. The Colts are a team that have been trying to find that quarterback, right, since, of course, Andrew Luck. They've struggled to find it. And I think that obviously they're going to go with Richardson. And it definitely for his first game, I mean, definitely signs of encouragement for the future of this Indianapolis team. Of course, they didn't win the football game, but the future I think is solid in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's too early to tell, I feel, on Yona and Stroud, but obviously I think Richardson did have the best game. I mean, he threw a pretty bad pick near the end of that game, but overall, I mean, that's what you expect out of a rookie. There was some that was really good, some that was pretty bad. But I mean, as long as you still see that talent flash out, which is why he really jumped up draft boards over the past year, that arm strength, that rushing ability, I like what I saw out of him. Listen, the Colts, they don't have a lot of expectations this year. The Jaguars are expected to run away with that division, but if you could just start to see some improvement with that Colts team, now with Shane Steichen as a head coach, did a lot of good work for the Eagles offense last year. I think Indianapolis could be a team to look out for going forward.
All right, let's head across the diamond to baseball, because I know you guys have been waiting to talk about this. We're going to have 20 minutes or so about baseball, and I think the biggest talking point, and when we did our baseball season prediction video, I don't remember, and I think you guys can prove me wrong on this, how not high we were. I mean, I remember saying that they could be a sleeper team for the playoffs, but the Baltimore Orioles emerging, I think that should be the first talking point, other than the Yankees and Mets being disappointments. I think we rather should start on the highs of a team like the Baltimore Orioles. So, Chris, I'll start with you. Baltimore, man, what are your thoughts on them?
I mean, the Baltimore Orioles are an unbelievable baseball team. Everything, kind of opposite of what we said with the New York Giants. Really, everything that could have gone gone right with this team. Everything that you thought this team would need to have in order to go on a run to the playoffs as possibly a wild card team has gone right, and even more so. I mean, this team is getting unbelievable production from their offense. Adley Rutschman is a star. Cedric Mullins is a star. I mean, all over this lineup, they're calling up young players day after day. Jordan Westberg the other day, a few months ago. But the other day they announced they're calling up Heston Kjerstad. And this comes in spite of a rotation that on paper you wouldn't expect to be a championship caliber rotation. I mean, Kyle Gibson, maybe numbers wise, isn't the best pitcher in baseball, but he had a damn good month last month, and he's been a solid veteran pitcher for them to rely on. Guys like Tyler Wells and another very underrated pitcher, a guy who I was high on last year, Bradish, Kyle Bradish. That's his name. He's really good. The bullpen, the back end of the bullpen with guys like Yenier Cano and Felix Bautista, and then another a huge mix of these random right-handed pitchers who can throw 100 miles an hour, like Michael Bowman and Brian Baker. I mean, they added Jack Flaherty, who I'm not sure exactly what his numbers are, but I don't think he's been the best since they acquired him. Everything has gone right for this team, up and down this lineup. Well, Aaron Hicks, they added Aaron Hicks, and he's been fairly serviceable. Again, I don't know exactly his numbers, but I saw he had a home run the other day at Fenway. I mean, I know his numbers definitely went up when he went to Baltimore. This team has been unbelievable, and they head into a humongous 4-game set with the Tampa Bay Rays in Baltimore, where they haven't won the division yet.
It's on the line.
They haven't. Right, it is on the line. I think whoever. I don't know if there will be a split. I would be pretty confident that either way. I'm going to say that the Baltimore Orioles win 3 or 4 in this series. Personally, I think they've been dominant at home, although they just lost 2 of 3 to the St. Louis Cardinals, who have been awful this year. But this team is great, and we're going to get into the playoff predictions. But if you want my early prediction, I really think you're looking at your American League representative in the World Series. I think them or the Houston Astros, definitely. I think.
So I don't hate that pick. Just for reference, Jack Flaherty has been worse than Carlos Rodon this season. Since joining the Baltimore Orioles, this is bad. It's bad. Since joining the Baltimore Orioles, he is 1-2 with a 7.16 ERA. Yeah, that's not good. He's also not had a start over 6 innings since his first start with Baltimore. So he hasn't been great.
Even further proves how good this team has been offensively.
But it's an interesting bunch, and of course, I can't go with this team without mentioning my AL Rookie of the Year prediction picking Gunnar Henderson.
I forgot about him. He's been unbelievable.
I think
I didn't forget, but
there's so many other players, and they have Ryan Mountcastle. They have so many interesting players that Austin Hayes in the outfield as well. They have so many good players that no one really talks about. It's a lot of promoted players or interesting free agent signings. They have this I think they're a pretty talented roster. I don't think they're a World Series contender yet because of how young they are. In a couple of years, if they continue playing at this level, then I'll be on that hype, but not yet for them.
The reason I say I think they can do it, I really there's something about that ballpark when they move the wall back and the energy that comes across that stadium. For some reason, this team lives up to the moment. Eventually, they're going to need to get better pitching. I don't know how sustainable this bullpen is. I don't know how Yennier Cano has been a wonderful find, but how long is he going to be this good? How long? Obviously, this rotation is not going to be here forever, so you're going to have to add to it. I thought Dylan Cease. I thought they were going to pull off a big trade for Dylan Cease at the deadline, who has also been underwhelming in Chicago, as that whole entire team has been an utter complete mess. The laughing stock of Major League Baseball, slightly worse than the Yankees somehow. But I thought they were going to get him and improve this rotation for the future, but I think they still can do that in the offseason. But this team, a reason, and I know I think that's why I say it's between them or Houston. I think Texas took a big hit with losing Scherzer, but they're still a good team. They're struggling. I think they're just out of playoff mix now. I think they're just out of it. I think a game out, they can definitely get back into it. Houston's got the experience, but there's something about Baltimore at home that I would take them any home game in the playoffs because they have the right pieces for the moment, right? They can get you that big home run when you need it. They can close out games. They can get a big strikeout and make things, make it tough for hitters to get on base. These players know their home ballpark well, and it's hard for guys to come into Baltimore and understand how to play at that ballpark. So after this year, they're going to need to make some big improvements. But because eventually the league could catch up to them and play better in that stadium. But there's just something about that atmosphere and the dimensions of the park that the Orioles just seem to live up to the moment. And in a playoffs, that's exactly what you need. You need the guys who can do it in the big moments.
I think you two mostly covered it. I mean, but listen, this Baltimore Orioles team, I remember for years, this is a team that was at the bottom of the AL East. They went on a very long rebuild process, and they're really kind of the model for a lot of teams who are going through that right now, how you build yourself into a World Series contender. I mean, what they've done with this team establishing that young core, really headlined by Adley Rutschman, Gunther Henderson, but a fantastic job. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I think you should have a lot of high expectations going into October because we've seen a lot of young teams go on runs. It's not that far out of the question to say this team could do it. So I'll have to wait to see how it plays out, of course. But yeah, I mean, Baltimore has been kind of the story of the league so far this year. But with time running out, I think we kind of have to at least touch on our own teams, the Yankees and the Mets. Obviously, going to start off with the Yankees side of the mic here. The big story recently in Yankee land was being able to call up Jason Dominguez and Austin Wells. There's a lot of excitement surrounding that. Dominguez had 4 home runs in his first 7 games, but we heard he tore his UCL for the rest of the year. And he's going to be out till at least July or June of next year. He ended up just having Tommy John surgery just recently. It's really tough to see because, listen, this is a guy who I didn't personally expect to be called up this early. I mean, we heard about this guy for so long being, a 5-tool, switch hitting center fielder. It seemed kind of too good to be true, but, I mean, at least from what we saw in that one Houston series, he really lived up to that hype. Listen, he was electric to watch, man. And just going forward, this is kind of the approach the Yankees need to take. Go more young, go for these other guys like Anthony Volpe, even Everson Pariah, even Austin Wells. We want to see that young core kind of develop a little bit more because, listen, I think kind of that veteran, we saw us just get rid of Harrison Bader, a lot of the other guys who are older on their way out. I like the youth movement. I think this is the way you have to go going forward. It just sucks to see Dominguez miss that much time. But I mean, we're currently 73 and 73 right now. The playoffs are not in the picture right now. It's not going to happen. So, you hate to see that, especially for coming off a year where you made the ALCS, but it just kind of looks like the Yankees need to retool going forward. I mean, you still got some pieces intact. You still have Garrett Cole, who's likely going to win the AL Cy Young. He's had a phenomenal season. Aaron Judge, he might not have as high of an average as he did last year, but he's still mashing home runs, still doing Aaron Judge things. So you still have a couple great players in that team. You just have to retool, go for the youth movement, and see where you go from there.
When it comes to the Yankees, right, it's so tough, right? Last week or before this Dominguez injury, I was planning to come on here and have a very optimistic view on next season. I still think there is a chance for that. Obviously, Aaron Judge is a star. You hope he's healthy. The big thing, right? These young guys, right? There's other young guys here. Volpe has, overall, in my opinion, had a very nice rookie season. I know the average is not where you want it to be, But to have a 2020 season, right, 20 home runs with 20 stolen bases in his rookie season, I think that's something. If you were to tell me and any other Yankee fan Anthony Volpe would be doing this season, I think we'd be very satisfied with that. He's also been very solid defensively, despite maybe the arm being a bit of a question. But the problem, and right, it's pretty evident, right, that is that Anthony Volpe should not be batting high in the batting order for the New York Yankees, right? He should be this guy who's at the bottom of the order, and right, it's been a problem. This offense has been terrible, and I've talked about it all summer, so I've kind of lost my genuine. I haven't really been angry at this team. Really, I think the last time I was truly angry was the trade deadline, and that also came after a stretch of just kind of being deflated with this team. I think the last anger, really, I think that for me that came in maybe the beginning of July, and then right middle of July to the trade deadline. Then the anger came back because I thought they handled that terribly, awful, just awful way to handle that trade deadline, right? You look at Harrison Bader had to get claimed off waivers by the Cincinnati Reds when you probably could have got somebody for him, somebody. And, if you want to bring up that maybe these guys don't really ever become anything, the guys you get for rentals like that, I'll bring up the Josh Fields trade to the Los Angeles Dodgers from the Houston Astros back in 2016, where the Astros end up getting a random prospect who would turn out to be Yordan Alvarez. I mean, things happen. You never know what you can get back for players, and I thought the New York Yankees handled it terribly. You either go out and you buy, and you get somebody. Obviously, and you could talk about last offseason how they handled the outfield situation. They didn't go into the season with a left fielder. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa has played the outfield, and he's trying his best. The guy's trying his best all year. He is not part of the problem. I don't think he should come back, but I would want him back. But you know what? He's done everything he could. He just should not be playing outfield as much as he has. And obviously, there have been a lot of injuries. The starting pitching started to wear off a little bit towards the end. I'm still confident about that Carlos Rodon can be the guy, can be a big piece of this team moving forward. We'll see what he can do next year with the spring training. We're gonna have a lot of time to dissect this team, right? The off season's coming up. Talking about, right, maybe when it comes to the front office and the manager, right, what I think should happen. I think at the end of the season we'll have kind of our analysis of what went wrong this season, what went right. But as of now, with the season still underway, really, I was planning to come on here and be more optimistic with the youth movement. I thought Dominguez looked phenomenal in his games here. He played with such a calm demeanor that I thought was perfect for this team and for young major leaguers. I think there's definitely optimism moving forward, but some of the few, obviously that optimism of seeing this young player be a big piece of this team, that obviously is not going to be, that obviously is not going to happen for most of next season, because you figure there obviously are setbacks, and then there's the possibility, the obvious rehab that will need to follow, the recovery time from the initial surgery. So it sucks, but I think there's optimism. There are pieces out there in free agency. The Yankees have a good front, right? You're seeing it now offensively, but also pitching wise, there are some good prospects. They have to come up and perform at the big league level, though, right? I'll believe it when I see it at the big league level. The Yankees have had interest in the star Japanese pitcher Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who just unbelievable numbers in Japan, and we've seen enough from pitchers that come from Japan to understand that they translate. The Japanese NPB is a terrific league for baseball, and I think he will be a star in at least the first few years that he comes to Major League Baseball. Eventually, the league tends to maybe adjust, but I think he definitely will be a star because he's been an unbelievable pitcher, a generational talent coming from Japan. And if the Yankees can land him, again, the problem is the offense. They still need a left fielder, and now they're going to need a center fielder because their center fielders went down, Jason Dominguez, and so this team needs things, right? But we're going to have a lot more time to talk about that in the future, especially right after the season. But I think to end it, we got to talk about the New York Mets, right?
I only think it's right, and with the Mets, you would think I would be coming on here and speaking like how you did. There's not much hope for the future. And I'm going to do like how you did, flip it, put it in a reverse card and saying that there is some hope for the Mets. Is there a lot? You can argue about that. But listen, the emergence of Kodai Senga has been as advertised. I was able to watch in person a couple of starts from him. Forkball, absolutely nasty. Fastball, it blows it right by opposing hitters left and right. Curveball, breaking stuff, all the whole shebang. I think he looks fantastic. You've begun to see the emergence of Ronnie Mauricio. You have other stars like Beatty, Vientos. You have Pete Alonso still around. You have Brandon Nimmo, who you have on a long-term deal. Francisco Lindor still at shortstop. Second base, will it be Jeff McNeil in the future? No idea. You have still Francisco Alvarez. So Edwin Diaz will be fully healthy entering next season. So you have pieces that you will have long-term, and you'll have some idea what to do with them. The issue is you go out and spend as much money as the Mets did, and you trade Scherzer, who actually just got injured again. You trade a bunch of other pieces, and listen, I like the trade from Scherzer to get Acuna's brother. I thought that was smart, but some of the other ones, not so sure about. So the Mets, I think they should be talked about barely at all because I still have hope for them, but I'm not sure about what they will do long term. But to conclude this episode, we're bringing it back from last year, Thursday night predictions. The poll, of course, on my Instagram, we did the poll, and everyone. I'll tell you the numbers from the poll in a second. Actually, no, I'll tell you now. 79% of the people we had, 29 people voted in the poll, and we had 79% vote for the Eagles and 21% for the Vikings. So I'm going to start with one of you two, whoever wants to go first. Who do you have tonight? Minnesota or Philadelphia? We'll start with Colin.
At first, I was tempted to pick Minnesota, but I'm going to go for Philadelphia. The reason why is because, sure, they didn't look as good against the Patriots as you would have hoped. The offense looked kind of stagnant after jumping out to that 16-0 lead. But once again, this is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is actually the same matchup we got in week 2 in primetime last year. It was a Monday Night Football game in Philadelphia. The Eagles pretty much dominated them, winning 24-7. Kirk Cousins had a really poor game. He had 3 interceptions to 1 touchdown. But this is really kind of one of the one bad spots you saw in the Vikings regular season last year. I expect that being in Philadelphia once again, the Eagles will take care of business, though I see it being a close game. If you're going to ask me for a final score prediction, I'm going to go 27-24. Eagles take the victory.
I am also going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? It's the home opener. The Vikings lost a tight game to the Buccaneers, right, with Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, right? It was a tough loss, and that was at home. Now they go to Philly. The Eagles also, of course, did not play well enough in New England, but right, that again, a road game, and I think it lines up well for the Eagles to take this game. All right, for a final score prediction, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna say like maybe a 25-17, win for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's gonna be a fairly comfortable win. Maybe not insanely high scoring, but enough to get the job done, win a comfortable football game.
Listen, I like that one. The only issue with me tonight for the Eagles is they currently have 3 starters out, and it could possibly be a 4th. Players out for them tonight. We have Kenneth Gainwell, the starting running back, James Bradbury, and Reed Blankenship, and it's very possible that star defensive tackle Fletcher Cox could be out as well. Despite all of that, I am still picking the Philadelphia Eagles. You have to rely on. I'm gonna predict a big night for DeAndre Swift. I love DeAndre Swift when he was with the Lions. I think he's gonna have a great day against the Minnesota defense. I think he's gonna have a big day, and I'm gonna predict a big night for Devontae Smith. I'm gonna go Eagles 27, Vikings 17. A nice one. Nice way to have the home opener for the Eagles. And with that will be all the time we have for today for episode 1 of season 2 of Into the Stands. Like we said, 3 guys, only 2 mics, but 1 show. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see us on Instagram, we have at Into the Stands on Instagram. And on that page, you can follow any the 3 of us as well. They'll all be in the bio of that Instagram. We'll see you guys every Thursday from 5 to 6 right here in the studio. But for Colin, Chris, and myself, Robbie Basil, we'll see you guys next Thursday. Goodbye, everyone.